to have
Hi, everybody. This is Jess Block from Factor. We're just going to give everybody about 1 minute to join, and then we will get started. Welcome. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to your GenAI Legal Roadmap, Delivering Wins When the Game is Changing. This is a first in a webinar series from Factor, focused on generative AI and the impact that this is having on our environment and industry, called Sense of Direction. So we look forward to talking to you today and over the coming months about this topic. I'm Jess Block. I'm our Chief Growth and Transformation Officer here at Factor. And I will shortly introduce our panelists, but let me just remind everybody what we're here to talk about. So just to set the stage, as everybody knows, generative AI is ripping through the public discourse and into our work lives. We at Factor have spent a lot of time over the last year talking to legal and corporate leaders like yourselves, trying to make sense of the moment. And we know from our discussions that a lot of you are feeling paralyzed. Kind of, how do you reconcile your existing plans and investments and multi-year roadmaps with this incredible shifting landscape? So we are here to help share some perspective that will hopefully allow you to move from admiring the problem to tackling the opportunity. And we are bringing you an August panel of legal leaders that will help you to decide where to put more focus, what to pause, what to reconsider entirely, and what no regrets actions you can take in the near term. So let me introduce our panelists. We are very happy to have Donovan Bell. Donovan is a director in legal operations at Intel, and he's responsible for enterprise-wide contract knowledge and information management. Donovan has over 2 decades of experience in operational and technical leadership, delivering innovation strategies for enterprises such as Walmart, Microsoft, and Bobcat. Nice to meet you, Donovan. Thank you for joining.
thank you, Jess.
We also have Casey Flaherty, and Casey has a background in big law litigation, project management. He was in-house counsel for a Global 500 company, and also has been doing legal operations consulting with LexFusion. Casey is the Chief Strategy Officer. Casey focuses on advising clients like yourselves with an emphasis on market listening and community building. Hi, Casey. Thank you for joining.
Well,
Michael Collier. Michael's an award-winning corporate lawyer, legal operations director, and consultant here at Factor. Michael is our vice president and global head of consulting. Michael has over 20 years experience in legal operations and transformation, leading cross-functional teams to design, develop, and deploy innovative legal solutions. Hello, Michael. Before we go to our panel, we wanted to hear a little bit from our attendees. So I'm actually going to put up a quick poll, which will come up in a moment, just to hear a little bit from the audience around how you are meeting this moment. So how profoundly is GenAI reshaping your legal roadmap right now? Panelists, you can't vote. We're going to hear enough from you. You got your options up there. Give you a quick minute to get in. Going to show us what we've got, Ashley. All right. So this webinar seems to have come at a good moment for a decent percentage of you guys who are recalculating the route, still figuring out, is this a shortcut or a detour on your legal journeys? We'll have a lot of opinion and perspectives on that. A good number of you are buckling up and blazing trails. I think we at Factor are probably in that camp in terms of how we're reassessing our own investments. And then this is the beginning of the conversation for some folks. So great, good perspective and looking forward to the conversation. So with that, I'm actually going to lead off with Casey, who has been busy talking and advising many organizations on AI. Give us the lay of the land, Casey. What are you seeing?
An enormous amount of activity relative to kind of anything that's come before, at least in my working memory. But also some frustration. I'm here in London because just yesterday at Google, I hosted an event that I labeled and themed the expectations gap. And it was about the way that expectations have front-run execution, and in particular, how the application layer isn't yet mature. That is, people want to use GenAI, but that is in a generic sense. But the specific tooling that they look at isn't quite where they want it to be in a lot of respects, which makes them feel a bit trapped because while not all the promises of GenAI have been realized, the expectations have ratcheted up. And so they are feeling the pressure of the expectations of their organizations to do more, to do better, to move faster, but they're finding what's actually available doesn't permit them to do that. And so there is, again, an enormous amount of activity, but it's paired with some frustration and some question of what direction should we actually be going in? What is it that we should be doing right now, today, to be sure that we're where we need to be tomorrow? And so there's, again, frustration, there's confusion, but still excitement. People do recognize the transformational potential of this tech. So it's exciting times, but that excitement comes at a cost.
Yeah, no, that really resonates. Donovan, how does this apply to what you're seeing at Intel? Has it gotten harder, foggier, murkier in light of sort of all of the expectation, and how are you navigating that?
Yeah, no, first off, I love the poll, thinking about those choices in terms of, buckle up, we're blazing trails, in terms of recalculating route. The thing is, I think what it does express is you're not alone. We're all going through this. I think this Gen AI train has left the station. Those who's able to keep up are the ones that's going to win. Now, the key is, some of us are trying to hop on the tracks, and some of us are kind of in that we're blazing trail perspective. I'd like to think that at Intel we're on that forefront in terms of really being all in terms of how we leverage Gen AI to be a key factor for business acceleration. Now, that said, I like the recalculating route statement, because one of the challenges is to make sure that this doesn't become a big distraction, right? And that it is truly an enabler to what we do. And so we're definitely aiming to leverage this, and we're being very intentional. And I'm sure as we continue to discuss, I'll be able to kind of unpack that a little bit. But the key is, I think, just being nimble and our ability to then pivot. We have to make some key pivots given where Gen AI is going, where it's heading, and based on where our industry is heading, where technology is heading, and where our business is taking us.
No, that makes a lot of sense. In thinking about that pivot and thinking about that sort of wayfinding, how do I put one foot in front of the other? Michael, in your capacity as an advisor to companies like Intel or others, how are you thinking about teeing up some of those no regrets moves? What are the initiatives or directions that you want to take first from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jess. Some of the no regrets moves, I would say the underlying theme could be master the fundamentals or practice good hygiene. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Some no regrets moves, I'll give you three. The first one is governance. So one thing that we encourage clients to think about is to ensure that their policies are codified and articulated and accessible to those who need them. And one way to deploy governance effectively is to, for example, assign a mechanism or a person responsible for collecting and maintaining certain knowledge artifacts. Now, knowledge artifacts are assets. What does that mean? We mean, say in the contracting space, for example, templates, playbooks, essentially talking to all of the smart folks on your team, organizing and aligning on certain standards substantively. How do I negotiate a contract? What are my primary and secondary fallback positions on any particular clause? Codify and capture that information. Why is that important? Well, we encourage clients to think about artificial intelligence, GenAI or otherwise, as a new teammate. We're at a point where this technology can do quite a lot independently, but still requires some coaching, just like any other teammate. And so this codification, this governance exercise, that we call good hygiene, is designed to facilitate that coaching. And one of the very, very interesting things to think about for the folks on this call as well, usually when you want to engage in an exercise like this, developing knowledge, assets, or any sort of deployment of capital or resources, you have to make the business case for it. And sometimes we've seen leaders struggle to make the business case to develop out knowledge assets and so on. In this case, because this exercise is tied to your artificial intelligence roadmap, it's much easier to make that business case. The technology is an enabler. Your knowledge and the knowledge of your legal professionals, a critical component to that enablement. And so those are some of the fundamental no risk steps that we encourage folks to think about.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Obviously, Michael and I are both at Factor, so we've had the opportunity to have many long philosophical conversations about this. And I really like the idea that the way you teach people, the way that you keep people on the same page with respect to expertise, company positions, negotiation outcomes are the same ways that you're going to keep these artificial intelligences and make them valuable and make them consistent. So I love that idea of continuing to double down on this investment in knowledge assets. And, knew Michael was going to mention it to you all as a key element in taking the first steps in this path. So wanted to share a quick poll to see how this resonates with the way that you are thinking about knowledge assets as sort of a key part of your roadmap and your scale enablement. So how urgently is GenAI driving your focus, your organization's focus on knowledge assets and data readiness? Got some more options here. Would love for everybody, all of our attendees, to weigh in and share if this is sort of has come up yet within your organization as something that you are investing in. We've got a few more folks have joined since the beginning, so we might get a few more answers here. Just give everybody a quick minute. And Donovan, just so you can get your brain thinking, I'm going to ask for your reaction to this once the poll comes up. Would love to see how this resonates with what you guys are doing at Intel and how you're thinking about this.
Absolutely.
All right, Ashley, do you want to show us the results? All right. So definitely some organizations reacting to this push to start to codify knowledge assets and different data in a way that's consumable by these intelligences. And some folks were already on it and are just continuing to move at the same pace, which is great. And then others are still waiting. So Donovan, what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think it is a hurry up and wait situation in terms of we know that Gen AI can be a key driver, but it comes with some questions, right? I want to just kind of take that to call out really what's key. Number one, Michael, great response in terms of those critical foundational pieces that are important. That's something I preach heavily, especially as it pertains to our contracts and making sure our data hygiene's there. How do we avoid some of those pitfalls? But I want to call out two real critical aspects of success that I'm happy to say Intel's exemplifying these, and that's in how we approach this. One, there really needs to be a top-down approach. You have to have a very effective leadership and organizational buy-in to say this is something that we want to do, and that combined with progress rigor. So, really an intentional approach to how we go about addressing this. So at Intel, one of the things that we're doing is we actually do have an internal AI program that's inclusive of the entire organization. And so we're using all aspects across our org to really kind of identify what are those key use cases, what are those key areas that we can focus on, and that being a very critical aspect. The collaboration can't be undermined, and I think that's what helps you feel more safe. So you're not making sudden moves, but you're being very intentional. And then that second piece of what we do is we're also trying to identify priorities around that. And so a key, having a strong priority matrix, if you will, to really classify, here are these use cases, and that determines how and when we're going to focus our efforts and time towards those things. I think that's really important for us, and that's the approach we're taking, as it pertains to our assets, our knowledge, but really kind of extrapolating. Here are the things that we feel will help us advance our business forward, and how do we then find the right focus to be intentional in how we do that.
I think that's really helpful. I think with all of this, the landscape is changing really quickly. So effective decision-making frameworks, how you're going to prioritize, how you're going to link use cases to impact and influence and the parts of the organization that they're going to be most resonant with is a super important thing to get right as you tackle this big problem of rearranging your strategy, your roadmap. I also think, your really specific examples are always helpful to the audience. And so, Michael, I would love it. I mean, we at Factor, Casey mentioned this at the outset. Sometimes it's hard to use these technologies. The application layer is not necessarily there in off-the-shelf products, and learning how to contextualize and refine custom GPTs is something that does take some knowledge and experimentation. Where have you seen that going well? Can you give us some concrete examples of use cases that you've seen brought to life using these intelligences?
Yeah, absolutely, Jess. And this part, you all, is really, really interesting because in the first poll, a lot of you said that you're recalculating the route. And I think a lot of folks at this stage start to recalculate because they're not exactly sure what the technology can do. And Donovan said it, I think absolutely correct. Well, not necessarily starting with what the tech can do, but starting with what do we want it to do? And some of the use cases that we've deployed where we've actually built agents to act in a way that ultimately benefits us and will benefit our clients, as Jess said, they do align with some of those priorities. One example is a request intake agent. So what does that mean? Remember, we said these tools are essentially teammates that we can deploy in order to engage in certain tasks. So request intake agent essentially means, and this is something that we've developed at Factor, you all know when a matter comes in from your business stakeholders, it rarely comes in with all of the information that you need in order to address their request. And so you spend some time, reaching back out and gathering the information that you need in order to address that request. What if you could develop and deploy an artificial intelligence agent to do that information gathering for you? That is a request intake agent. Similarly, self-service agent. So what's that mean? You all see it all the time. Think about when you might go to Amazon to purchase something from the Amazon website or any other website where there's a bot that pops up and starts to interact with you and ask certain questions, or you can ask it certain questions in order to close knowledge gaps that you might have about the task that you're trying to achieve. Self-service agents will do the exact same thing, and that's a very interesting use case. A third one, and the last one that I'll share, it's really about negotiation analysis. So again, let's look at the contract space. So you have a standard template that you use for a particular activity. Say it's a master service agreement or something like that. Send it out to counterparty sends you back a red line. What does the red line say? What level of risk has that red line document or counterparty's pushback on some of your standard positions introduced to the organization if you were to accept them? An agent can do that summarization for you. Very interesting. All of this requires quality control, of course. This isn't something where necessarily humans are out of the loop, but what we're really talking about is going from this level of human effort to this level of human effort, which anyone would, in baseball, that gets you into the Hall of Fame. It's, we're talking about pretty significant decreases in level of effort and efficiency. And one thing that we found in, the last wave of prominent technology and contract lifecycle management tools, for example, is that they have lots of good utility and folks have spent lots of time developing them, but they're not particularly flexible. Sometimes overly simplified, not to diminish their value in any way, but not particularly flexible, sometimes by design. These tools, on the other hand, eminently flexible. Tying this back to some of that knowledge asset development that we described, and Donovan's point about identifying use cases and priorities around the organization, you can take that information and create a tool that's fit for purpose. That is pretty exciting.
I agree. Very exciting. And Michael just gave a handful of examples. We've thought a lot at Factor about the different ways to create those fit for purpose accelerators, going after a very micro specific pain point. Casey, would love to hear from you about, understanding the potential. How do you think that this capability will transform the legal operating model? What do you see the biggest near-term and future impacts based on your discussions and what you've seen? And before I give it to you fully, I did not mention at the beginning, if our audience has questions, please feel free to drop in the Q&A, and I'm happy to try and get those in front of our panelists too. Back to you, Casey. What's coming? Crystal ball.
Well, fundamentally, I think it will allow us to keep pace with more work. So the largest transformations will not happen in legal, they will happen in enterprise. And there will be higher volume and increased complexity. And legal will be there to help enterprise navigate that higher volume and increase complexity. And these tools will be a big part of the higher volume and increased complexity, and then they will be a big part of allowing us to keep pace. So I think the total demand for lawyers and allied professionals goes up, but the amount of the number of matters or contracts or whatever legal unit of measure happens to be in your space per head count is going to go up even more. And so the legal operating model will become much more tech enabled, much more technology leveraged. But there are lots of dreams that somehow it will all be automated away. That all of a sudden legal services will be free and not require interactions with human beings. And while that sounds like a bit of a nightmare to me, I don't think it will come to pass. And so we will see service model innovation. We will see business model innovation. We will see a much higher level of scrutiny on in-house budgets. Whether it's we want more headcount because we have more work, or we want more money to pay bodies externally because we have more work. Again, think what you will about GenAI and how much it's fulfilled its supposed potential, but the expectation shift is quite real, and it is having a profound impact today, much more profound than the technology itself. And it's not new in that the structural trends leading to higher scrutiny of legal budgets, both from a external spend and headcount perspective, was already there. It was already getting worse, but GenAI has been an accelerant, and I can suspect that we're only going to go faster and faster. You know, but velocity has two elements, both speed and direction, which means you have to know where you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And that's what makes this so hard. So much of what we're talking about is choosing a direction and moving along it at all deliberate speed. And that deliberate piece is pretty tricky. What is the right pace? Because doing nothing is a terrible plan. But trying everything is both impossible and going to lead to an enormous amount of waste. And so a lot of law departments are going to face a lot of hard choices and have imperfect information when making them.
No, that makes sense. I mean, just the human in each of us kind of has a hard time letting go of the optionality of having major success in all of these directions. But prioritization and thinking very closely about how to tie what you're doing, how you're experimenting, what changes you're trying to make to the direction that the enterprise is going makes a lot of sense. Donovan, I mean, has the advent of generative AI had any impact on the velocity of your enterprise? Is
Just
that
a little.
translating to larger legal workloads? Do tell.
Just a little. Two ways of looking at it, and I mean, and you're talking to someone who comes from the company where Moore's law came from, and so that concept of speed and you know how things happen fast in terms of the acceleration of as a result of technology is very paramount. And so I would say it's a great time to be in the field of legal operations because we are not short of demand and need from that aspect. So, and GenAI, as Casey alluded to, only accelerates kind of that expectation. And I think that is the challenge: is how do you manage those expectations that are everything needs to be immediate, everything needs to be fast because of what technology can potentially give us. And so my response to that is it's kind of taking a step back and being very intentional and strategic as opposed to being very tactical and saying, okay, well, it means this tool, that tool. No, it really means we really need to take a process-centered approach that really ensures that we're meticulous and solving the right problems, challenges, and prioritizing them in the right manner. So one of those things that from our perspective may mean that we start with low effort but very high value, use cases, and that being the starting point. And then that's where that prioritization matrix really comes into effect of understanding, okay, how do we then intelligently determine and unemotionally determine here's where our focus needs to be, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that this is simplifying the lives of our business, our legal teams, et cetera.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, you mentioned this before, Donovan, that top-down perspective on how to sort of funnel all of the activity through a cohesive framework that will have centralized resonance across the organization is very much in line with, I think how I've been thinking about it. And this is sort of an open question to all of you. How do you take advantage, though, of the excitement on the ground? The experimentation that everybody's got going, whether or not it's within the enterprise, if it's on their own computer or otherwise. How do you bring that energy into that centralized prioritization, road mapping type of framework?
I believe, if I could start, I believe a fail fast approach is in order, meaning find small, quick wins, and deliver that. So take a test and learn approach to where you're evaluating quickly, seeing if you can find, and that's where I kind of highlight that low effort, high value. Are there areas where you can find a quick win, and providing that, and being open to, once that comes in, getting that feedback to know, is this on track? Is this kind of heading where we're going? That can help you formulate a good, strong, and reliable roadmap of how to succeed on that.
Yeah,
Hey,
on
Michael?
Monday, I was at a workshop at a large corporation, put on by our good friend Ed Sohn. And if anyone hasn't read part 2 of Sense and Sensibility, I strongly urge you to. But Ed was talking to a large law department that I know intimately well and know that they have had access to these tools from day one, and that there's been a big push from leadership to be very serious about this involvement of the enterprise's own data science team. And yet, in that room, for a lot of stakeholders, it was the first time they ever even played with it. That they had logins to secure LLMs and a secure environment, and they'd heard all about it before, but this event created the space for them to actually play with it. And true play. We weren't trying to solve any legal problems in that moment. We were just trying to get people familiar with the tech. I know Ed had a great interview with Ethan Mollick, who I think is the best kind of pragmatic voice of AI optimism. And he suggests that it often takes at least 4 hours for people to start to understand what this tech is and what it does. And until they just get their hands a little dirty, they don't have that excitement, let alone that understanding. And so while I certainly agree with Donovan, for a lot of stakeholders, before you can even fail fast, you just need to let them play. And creating that space to let them play can be so advantageous because it sets the stage for future discussions. One of the things Ed talks about really well in his Sense and Sensibility, and he spoke at my event here at Google, is that you don't get to imagine that you're going to have a new cadre of people, that we're going to get rid of all the old people, and then we're going to get all of these AI forward people to replace them, because they don't exist. You have to create them. And that means putting real effort into leading people where they're not necessarily going to go on their own, because that's what leadership is. And that space, I thought, was so great because you were in the room and you could feel the energy rise from a lot of people who brought that kind of natural lawyer skepticism and the even more natural sense of being absolutely busy all the time and underwater. And I don't have the time or the space to think about this new thing because I have deadlines.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly relevant point, which is as you think about whether it's asking for funding, asking for shifts to your roadmap and resources, you might also need to really be thinking about just allocation of the resources you have, because the people that are there are the people that are going to unlock this for you. So it's not just an addition or an exogenous thing that's going to impact your roadmap.
Can I just say amen, Casey? From that standpoint, great insight. And I think what becomes very critical as a competency is dealing with ambiguity. You need folks that are willing to deal with to that point of understanding. I've got that noted. Let them play. I think that's a great insight.
Yeah, no, I'll add one more thing to that. I agree with everything that you all said. I think it's very insightful. And in part, what we're talking about is change management. And we know that there are impediments to change. And there's fear of change, and more importantly, the fear of loss associated with the change. I understand and sometimes like the way that things are. If we change them, that introduces some unknown. And so, to Casey's point, the idea of experimentation and actually getting your hands dirty helps to close those knowledge gaps. And legal professionals, if you look at Dr. Larry Richards' writings or analysis on lawyer brains, so both with lawyers and folks working in the legal profession, there's a certain conservativeness, appropriately so, because of our role. There's a high level of skepticism amongst lawyers and folks in the legal profession, also appropriately so. And so, in the change management context, we have a couple of principles, and 5 of them that we typically think about. I'll share just 2 of them. One is we oftentimes say, don't just make the change, make it a change campaign. And I tell you, with the energy and excitement associated with artificial intelligence, great opportunity to do it. When I worked at Nike, as you all know, that organization, they are masters of marketing. And interestingly, inside of the organization, those master marketers would oftentimes turn that energy on internally to get folks to move collectively in a certain direction with excitement and so on, so that the folks internally would then take that energy and turn it out to all of us consumers. And we can do the same thing, maybe not as cool as Nike, but the principles are the same. We can turn that energy on by developing a campaign around this very exciting topic, which will help to move the needle with regard to change and adoption. Another important principle, and Casey pointed it out, it's not this instance where we're going to just lift and shift these, regular legal people, replace them with these, these tech-inclined legal people, which means that you're going to have some resistance. So the second principle to share is not everybody's going to get on board with this change, and that's okay. Not everybody's going to get on board, and that's okay. You don't need everybody. But you do need sort of a consensus of folks who are willing to move. And that, I suspect, Donovan, is one of the ways that you all also determine prioritization as you identify, use cases. Who's actually ready and on board and willing to, take some extra time side of desk to actually invest in this stuff so that we can get some outcomes that, again, help us to campaign for change across the rest of the organization. So just adding those to the other comments there.
Michael, I think you've done some really cool, speaking of cool, work recently, which is, these are big decisions in many instances to sort of take on experimentation, whether it's with internally built agents or commercially available features that start to pop up within existing platforms. And you've been working with a client on how to run a very practical, hands-on innovation exercise to observe results and sort of help to build both a business case as well as sort of a prediction of impact to the organization that you've been calling the Innovation Lab. We're going to spend more time on this in a later webinar in our series, but just really quickly, can you preview for us what that's been like and how that might be a good approach to helping to figure out, to Casey's velocity point, which direction to sort of put your energy in?
Absolutely. Thanks for teeing that up, Jess. And this one is also a very interesting and exciting one. So this innovation lab, the idea is ultimately to transform in the way that we've talked about by deploying advanced technologies, by doing. You all know, and you've seen it before, when we've deployed technology in our legal environments, oftentimes experience resistance. Some of that resistance comes because the tool just doesn't do what folks expect it to do. And again, when we think about lawyer brains, the level of skepticism associated with folks in the legal industry, as well as I think Casey or Donovan said it. I have other things to do, and I already have a way to do them. Please stop disrupting me. And so when we try to transform by doing in this innovation lab environment, we actually create and or replicate our client's operating environment by deploying some of our resources to do the work every day. We call it BAU, business as usual activity. We measure that work. What are they doing? How much of it are they doing? Establishing essentially a current state. How fast did things go? And then in that environment, we apply some of these advanced technologies and agents and so on to see how well do they work. And when we say how well do they work, there's a qualitative component. Well, how do folks feel about it? Is this helping me? And a quantitative component. Did we reduce cycle times? Have we increased throughputs, or how much work a person can do, increase productivity? And once we establish that the agent actually does what we intended, then we deploy it to the broader environment. So we can work out all of the kinks and wrinkles and establish a mechanism to deploy in the broader environment so that our little agent hits the ground running and doesn't experience the same resistance that we often receive from our legal industry constituents. So yes, upcoming webinar to discuss it further in detail. Suggest y'all attend, should be interesting.
Thank you, Michael. So technology use, always a big component of a legal operations roadmap. Casey, how would you respond to a client who, let's say they come to you now and they are multiple years into what has become sort of a big, rocky tech implementation? I mean, name your application area, whatever it is. What would you advise them now about potential impacts, opportunities, whether or not this is a sunk cost? How does that change?
Yeah, I'd be very worried about technology lock-in, which isn't to say I wouldn't do anything. But I would orient around AI readiness.
I'm wrapping up this call. It should wrap up in 15 minutes. So I'm just listening in.
Sandy.
Okay.
I would orient around AI readiness. Are we moving in a direction where as the application layer matures, as these tools get more performant at the things we want them to do, we can plug them into our workflow? Or are we path dependent because we're so locked into some particular system or some particular workflow? And so is the workflow flexible, and is it built for interoperability? whatever it is, so that we're not reliant on whomever it is to always be the best. So for example, CLM. There is no CLM provider that is going to have the best application for generating contracts, generating playbooks, applying playbooks, generating templates, compare, automated redlining, go down all the places that we're going to want to use AI. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have a platform that runs your workflow. You're still going to have a contract lifecycle one way or another, and you want that to be as automated as possible. But in making a decision, you want to look for not the company who has the best demoware, because it all shows well, but whose roadmap tells you that not only are they going to develop their own tech, but they're going to enable you to plug in whatever is best of breed as that application layer matures. And I would say that's going to be true across the board of any of your big systems. Is it flexible? Is it built and oriented towards interoperability? So as new things come into the market, you can utilize them.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think, and that strikes a great balance between taking some step, moving forward, versus being paralyzed by the optionality of sort of everything that you face. We're getting towards the end of our time together, and I did want to give the audience one more chance to post anything to the Q&A. If there are any burning questions or any threads that you all want to pull a little bit, and happy to let our panelists do that. But otherwise, I might just offer it back to the team. I mean, we've heard a lot. Oh, we got something. Okay. We have a question from the crowd about, can you talk a little bit about budgets for GenAI investment? So I think we've touched on budgeting in a few different ways, but maybe just provide some perspective on what you've seen coming into various legal budgets or being introduced into the legal department, how that's getting managed.
Tolstoy famously remarked that all happy families are the same, but every unhappy family is unhappy in their own special way. And so my beloved friend Kimberly, I can't necessarily speak to your budget at your shop because organizational context rules, and everyone is having a slightly different experience, though there probably is shared pain around getting sufficient budget. That said, there was a recent poll of CEOs. 100% of them were planning a material investment into Gen AI. I didn't find that to be the most interesting piece of the poll. If you actually break down the responses, 66% of that 100% planned on funding that significant investment by reallocating existing budget from elsewhere. That is, budgets are going to be rated, and therefore being able to tie into the Gen AI initiative budget is going to be material to keeping all of your projects on track. Whether or not they were originally Gen AI in their orientation, the Gen AI aspect might be critical for preserving that budget in a lot of areas. It also, again, in a lot of organizations, but I can't say in every organization, has helped people attack problems that previously there wasn't budget for, simply because it was in line with enterprise priorities. They're at enterprises where the priority, a new priority is, we need to take advantage of this technological inflection point. And the law department says, we completely agree. Here's a specific pain point we want to address. And we think part of the solution is Gen AI. This will not always end well. There's way too much solutions in search of problems. There's too much of people confusing means with ends. That said, you've got to understand that contextual reality of your organization If Gen AI projects get funding and other projects get cut, then you want Gen AI projects, whether or not you think that is the most prudent way to approach automation and scale.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Adding to that, so we've had, we do a number of projects every year, every quarter for clients, delivering for clients. They obviously always have some budget associated with them. And most recently, nearly every RFP or request from a client for support includes some aspect of artificial intelligence. It's been more of an inquiry, I would say, than a demand for discrete, Gen AI deployment. Just help us to deploy Gen AI or AI. And to Casey's point, it's almost always been associated with a broader initiative. I'll give you two examples. One is with, just say a Fortune 50 company, very, very big company. The other is with an SMB. And with the Fortune 50, they had this use case that they were solving for, where in this very broad organization that's grown extensively but inorganically through acquisition, there's a need to create some layer of connectivity across multiple departments and document sets, so that, for example, if the FTC comes calling and it's an enterprise-wide request for information, there's a way to look across the entire organization, collect and aggregate responsive information, and then respond. And so for those folks, the real request was, is there a tool that can help us do that? And we think that some aspect of generative AI will support that, help us answer that question, which we've done. In another case, the smaller organization, and obviously they have budget to achieve that, and we've selected a technology and we're deploying it enterprise-wide. In the other case, the smaller organization, they've made a lot of progress from a legal operations standpoint. They've developed out an interesting CLM module. They've obviously engineered it to a point where it meets their specific needs. And so at this point in their maturity, they actually want an AI tool. They say, give us an AI tool, but it's not that broad because they have like 10 different pain points that they're solving for. Now, they haven't necessarily prioritized those 10, but I'm sure they went from 30 to 10. And they said, we want a tool to help us satisfy these. And it's really those pain points that drive budget allocation, because there's some value associated with solving them. So I guess the trick, Kim, is build the AI deployment into an existing problem that resolution will be beneficial for the organization and properly funded.
No, that makes sense. All right, we're about to run out of time, so I'm going to do a quick lightning round. I'm going to go to Donovan first. If you were investing, what is your first step? One thing. Where would you start? Go. Go.
That's a great question. I would say this. I think you have to remember, and I see another question kind of talking about some of the challenges around execs asking what is our Gen AI strategy. I think you need to always remember, as a corporation, as an organization, you have a singular vision and strategy. And the question is, can Gen AI help us get there, right? So when it gets to where we would start, I start with our corporate vision and strategy, always. And how am I helping solve that challenge to help us get to where we're trying to get to as a corporation? And can these things be an asset to doing that? And so that has to be at the foremost and forefront of what you're doing. Having a nimble mindset to be able to adjust. And I buried the lead to start, which is this: don't go at it alone. other companies, others across your industry are probably dealing with some of these same challenges. Don't be afraid to cross those lines to ask questions of what are you doing and how.
I love it. Grab a friend and align to your North Star. Casey,
Yeah.
one thing.
You're on
Sorry, I'm
mute.
mute. But it gave me a second. The one thing is don't be discouraged. This is going to be like everything else. There will be ups and there will be downs. It will be hard, but it will be rewarding. And I completely agree with Donovan. Don't go it alone, and don't feel like you're that far behind. This is new to everyone. And while standing still is not the best option, even if you have stood still, it won't be that hard to catch up. Now, you want to be ahead of this change instead of behind it, because it will keep accelerating. But now is a completely reasonable time to start, and you will have a lot of companions on this journey. There are so many fellow travelers.
All right, I like that. So first step, invest in some friends. Michael, first step, what are you going to invest in?
Okay, a bit self-serving, but still authentic. Sense Collective, Innovation Lab. That's what are we still doing lightning round? Sense Collective, Innovation Lab.
That's two things, but I think Michael is just saying invest in Michael. And we should end on that. Thank you all for spending some time with us. Huge thank you to our panelists. We appreciate your sharing your broad perspective with Factor and with all of our attendees and those that are going to watch this recording. So next on the schedule, we will bring our good friend Ed Soam from Factor and Jay his co-collaborator, to talk about Sense and Sensibility Part 2 that Casey plugged earlier. And they will walk through their white paper and also share some perspective on guiding lots of organizations through this journey, especially the leadership and human-centric aspects of it. And we look forward to hearing from you all. Please share your feedback, and we will make this available for replay. Thank you so much. Good to be with you all.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.